said Orko and me, but we managed to rope in very, very good. Thank you so much for doing it. It was a little late, reaching out to you and stuff, but you managed to get it done.
Pleasure. Kids slept early today, so it's sneaking for a cameo appearance.
So we don't really have an agenda to talk about. So let's start with Orko, the historic, historic statement that you keep saying. Let's talk about that first.
There's no historic statement. I think just read off live law. I think the election of the executive committee is to be held expeditiously and concluded in terms of the time schedule indicated, which was before the World Cup, obviously. Elections be conducted in the manner consistent with Article 26 of the draft constitution. So they've agreed to that bit, which means anybody above 12 years, who's held a post will not be eligible. Right? That's one.
Yeah.
And that obviously rules out, a lot of interesting candidates. This would be an interim arrangement without prejudice. It is anticipated that the interim body would continue for a period of 3 months, subject to further order of the court. So that the constitution, can be ratified, and interim body should not claim equities on the basis of the present order, and present arrangement would be subject to further orders.
So essentially, what this means is the people
No
who are
ban.
right now.
No ban. FIFA World Cup
Yeah.
happens,
The people
which
who
we
are in
already
charge right
knew.
now stays in charge until
Yeah.
at least until the World Cup.
Yeah, that's pretty much it.
So everybody wins.
Everybody wins except
Oh,
I don't want to utter the two words that I'm thinking about.
okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
So Brad, we didn't really have anything in specific to talk about. We thought we'll just talk about everything together. Now that you are here, we thought we'll explore this possibility of talking about the coaching system that is currently here in India.
Sure.
Right. So, Orko wants to start. So,
Yeah. As a newly minted D license, very fledgling newbie, obviously I had a lot of questions, right?
Sure.
I went through the course and, as a layman, obviously, with only like prior experience of the football industry, very brief. So, uh, so I first wanted to know, you know, people obviously always point to the pro license and A licenses, right?
Yeah.
But the real molders of talent are really the grassroots D and C. Yes.
Or neither or none.
Okay.
The reason I say that is, I mean, you know the stats in India. If you look at, like, I think you know this better than anybody. I think you actually forwarded me those stats, where majority of the players that play in the top division, that's the ISL and the I League, come from states like Mizoram and Manipur, where if you look at the statistics of licensed coaches in India, possibly those two states at the time of when those stats were out had the least number of, you could say, licensed coaches compared to states like, for example, Maharashtra or even some states like, I don't know, UP or other places where, they're not producing players, but they've got lots of licensed coaches. And so it goes to show that, culture and all, there's a whole load of other factors that go into developing and producing players. And the licenses are just a sort of, as the name suggests, it's just a license. It doesn't mean, doesn't necessarily mean that because there's a load of de-licensed coaches in one particular part of India, there's now going to automatically start producing players, because there's some very good coaches who don't have licenses, and there's some very, very poor coaches who have the top licenses. And there's a lot in between as well. So there's a mixture of everything.
So as you take a lot of classes, right, for coaching and stuff. So when you are doing this, what are you looking for as a tutor at that time? And what are you not looking for as well?
So I think one thing just to make clear is, like, we're not looking as tutors to sort of pass fail necessarily. I mean, that's in the past, unfortunately, that was what coach education was synonymous with. People would be like, oh, don't go with that instructor, he's strict, or he doesn't pass people. And people wanted to pick particular instructors, and then you had a lot of foreign instructors where indirect bribery was the norm. Like, it was not uncommon for the end of a course and gets money by the Philippines or wherever, a gift for having come, which is basically a way of saying, oh, hope he leaves with a nice taste in his mouth and passes everybody. And I think as an instructor, what you want to do is impart knowledge, and you want people to, just like when you teach young kids, you want them to embrace the game and take up the game and play football. Similarly, you want coaches to embrace coaching and want to take up coaching as a professional, further their knowledge and gain more tools as a coach. So I think you want to impart knowledge, not look at it as a sort of a pass-fail thing. It's how, if you as an instructor conduct a course over there, and let's say 16 of them fail and only 4 pass, that's probably a reflection on you, the instructor, that over that course of whatever period of time, you didn't manage to impart knowledge effectively. So I think it's a two-way thing as well. You've got to look at it as how good a job can you do to teaching people who obviously want to learn. They wouldn't have signed up and paid the money and taken time off from their jobs to come there. So how much can you teach those people in that short period of time? How much can you get their peak their knowledge to sort of say, all right, I want to come back for more. I want to do more courses. I want to become, learn as much as possible about the whole profession of coaching.
So obviously, when taking this course, you meet all sorts of coaches, right? I mean, and I'm gonna try to gauge what we as a nation are good at. Obviously, we can't, because we're essentially 30 different cultures, in one, right? But I wanted to touch one key aspect of coaching is planning, right? And as someone who's taken a lot of courses, do you think we are taught enough on the planning aspect? Do you think this is something that could improve across the board?
I think I've done coaching courses in 4 different continents, from Europe, South America, US, in India, obviously, and both instructing as well as being a participant. I think one of the big takeaways, look, football hasn't changed. Okay, football is the same. It's 2 goals, there's 1 ball, 2 teams, stick the ball in the back of the net. And you read an old Charles Hughes manual, which dates back to 70s in England, which they used to give us when I started coaching, to what's taught on coaching courses now. The principles of attack, principles of defense, nothing has changed. I think one of the best things you can take away from any coaching course is the networking. You meet other coaches. And I think that peer-to-peer learning is what's going to give you more than any content of the course. And I think you've got to have an open mind as well. You shouldn't go in there thinking like, all right, this is what's been taught. And I think that's a failure on our education system in India, not just our coach education system. It's just Indian education system in general, is that we're taught that, if you all remember our school days, it's like, this is the syllabus. This is what it is. Don't think outside the box. Copy verbatim, pass the exam, right? You don't need to understand it. You just need to regurgitate it on the day of the exam. And unfortunately, that spills over into all our education, whether it's coach education. So you can't plan in India because it's impossible. To get back to your question, it's like, when's the next game? And if I've got an under 14 team and you're talking about planning and there's a topic on it, until the AFF decides when they're going to host or hold an under 15 league, you can't do anything with that. Will your state association announce it? Most probably 1 week before. So you've got to be creative rather than actually wait to plan. I'll give a perfect example of it. When my first coaching job here was with Lajong, and all I knew was we relegated from the previous season before I joined, and then you had to pick the team up, try and get them promoted again. So there's going to be a promotion at some point, and there's going to be a second division. What format it was going to be in, which month, where, nothing was known. So you can either sit around and choose to wait, or you can create your own calendar. And by the end of it, we had actually played 40 games, and we went on to win it. So you talk about planning, you've got to do your own thing. You've got to be creative now. People would argue that it was easy for me because I was in the Northeast, lots of teams, lots of tournaments, etc. So different parts of the country, you've got to adjust to whatever cards you're dealt with. If you're in a Pune or something, you don't have that luxury. So you've got to just be creative and think outside the box and how you're going to figure out solutions. And again, same thing with age groups. I've always said this. coaching course, and like, for example, if I was doing a coaching course in Bangalore, a D license, there's 20 coaches there. Most of them will be from that city. Most of them. So instead of sitting around and bitching that the Karnataka Football Association hasn't organized an under-14 league or there is no AFF under-14 league, why not each of those coaches, you're on a WhatsApp group, instead of sending, happy Christmas or some silly jokes or, happy birthday messages on that WhatsApp group, how about you say, hey, who wants to play a friendly game this Saturday? How about we just, 10 coaches decide, we'll all play, we'll make our own little schedule, we'll play each other every Saturday. You come home this time next week, we'll come away, we'll come to your ground. You make your own mini league like that. How many coaches come off of a coaching course and actually do that? So if you want to, you can. If you want to sit and blame somebody else for it, blame your state FAs, blame the national FAs, that's the easiest thing. And so I always say on coaching courses, be proactive and use that network that you have to achieve something for Indian football, rather than if you sit waiting for someone to do it, good luck. You'll be here for a long time.
So I'm just going to ask you I have a very controversial question for Prat, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean...
I'd expect nothing less, okay.
Sorry, I'm the butter of heads. Anyone with head injuries steers here, right? So, the thing is, I've seen this phenomenon, right? Because now I've been in and around. So, is there a possibility that most coaches interpret the definition of coaching as just assembling a team 1 month? Most Indian coaches do this, right? I've seen this. I've seen this at my local level. I don't know if it's the pattern, throughout India. I've kind of seen football across the country. Yes. So, but I want to know from you whether you think that this is the same. It's a phenomenon that happens, that people would rather assemble teams, than develop them over time.
Okay. Well, depends what you're asking. I mean, you're asking about the East Bengal phenomena, or you're asking just, in general, I think cost plays a big factor in it. If you ask, I'll give a perfect example, like second division now, right? If you're a prospective second division team, do you put together a team, sign contracts now? You basically, today's the 3rd, you've got 28 days to sign your players before the transfer window closes. So you can choose to sign your 20 players, 22 players, a minimum that you need, and then offer them contracts where you're paying them per month, start training, with no clue when or where the second division is going to take place and in what format. Right? So if you're an owner, or if you're the person in charge, you've got to justify, why am I paying salaries from August 1st to May 31st for a league that you have no clue about? Then a lot of other teams will say, let's be clever, let's game the system, let's just sit and wait. Now, suppose the AFF sticks to their word that they gave a few months ago and says, we'll start in November. Realistically, what will happen, most clubs will object and say, we can't start in November because we can't sign players, we can't loan anyone now, the window's closed. So we push it for 2 months, we start in Jan 15th, once the window's open. So now, all of a sudden, teams can sign a 3-month contract because the league's going to end in March, for example. Jan, Feb, March, 3-month second division, which by the last couple of years was actually double the length. So now you're competing with teams who can offer monthly wages-wise significantly more because it's only 3 months. And they sign people in the January window, get players from ISL, I-League in that Jan window, and compete and go on to do a Rajasthan United, right? Quickly assembled team goes on to win it because of the nature of the format. So the system at the moment almost is leaning towards, you're better off doing that way rather than planning long-term. If you had a long-term calendar for 3 years, then that system that we just spoke about, where teams are put in the last minute, won't work. And it's that same thing trickles down to youth levels. Sandeep knows this from the old HAL days. HAL's youth development was, wait till the I-League under-18 dates are announced. When they announce, hold trials, give jerseys out. Right, that's our under-18 team. The moment that tournament finishes, or that qualifying round finishes, give us our jerseys back, see you later. No contact with those kids. And the reason they had to do that was because club licensing criteria. Have to have an under-18 team, right? Let's tick the box. The moment you stop making it a box-ticking exercise and make it meaningful, all these factors can get eliminated. So there's a lot of effect for everything. It's not as just simple as, all right, people put it to last minute, because there is a cost factor to that.
So how much is this? We always hear about these assistant coaches, Indian assistant coach, and ISL is putting Indian assistant coach, giving opportunities, blah 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 blah. How much is that actually helping coaches? Because a lot of them were first team coaches. Like Tang Boy used to coach Shillong Lajong, and many of them used to coach, and some of them have never coached before also. So you've seen both sides of the spectrum. So how much is that a helpful thing?
Look, I think initially, I think it was a bad rule whereby you mandated that. Effectively, the rules, I mean, never clearly said it, but by the whole marquee rule was that nobody, none of the Indian coaches qualified as marquee because of the way the description was. And then over the years, they've removed that. And then they had this mandatory Indian assistant coach rule. I think it was good to have it, because if you didn't have that, there'd have been many teams which didn't even have any Indian coaches involved in it, because most coaches would have opted to bring their own, somebody who spoke their language, etc. But then, because the rule was such, anytime you put a rule that's restrictive, it creates sort of, it's almost like quota system, and then it's demand and supply. 10 ISL teams or 11 ISL teams, whatever, every year. In those days it was 8. So automatically now you're looking for an A licensed Indian coach. But there's only 8 positions. So now, instead of clubs going for necessarily the best, you'd go for the people who would, if somebody wanted what they were getting in the I League in those days. I mean, if you look at salaries of what some of us were getting in the I League as I League head coaches, or even the second division as head coaches, initially the ISL is throwing money. You thought, okay, so people were going there. But then, again, like I said, demand and supply, too many coaches, too few positions, people are undercutting one another. So people are going in on salaries which you wouldn't take an I League job in those days for that amount of money into the ISL. And then that leads to, all right, if you're not earning it off the paycheck, you earn it off other means. And, it's not uncommon to have heard of stories of where the Indian assistant coaches who were involved primarily with recruitment were in cahoots with agents. So it just leads to, the coaches veering off in a different direction, or the other direction as well, which, you just become a BBC coach. That's balls,
Yes.
balls, bibs and cones. That's all you deal with, right? And I've heard that from some coaches where effectively, like, all right, when the ball goes out, pass the ball in, you pick up the bibs, or you hand out the bibs because you know the names, and pick up the cones at the end of the session, or put the cones out for the warm-up. That's about it. Meaningful coaches taking part was very, very few and far between, for various reasons. But that said, there are some coaches who utilize their assistants very well and gone on to have a lot of success as well. So, but by and large, yeah, you're spot on about it. It just created a sort of whole, even the foreign coaches coming in, they thought, oh, he's just there because there's a quota for an Indian coach. He's not there because he's the best man for the job. I didn't have any say in his input, or is he close to the management? So there was always that little genuine, I would say 9 times out of 10, there was, from the day one, there was just mistrust.
It is. I mean, we've heard a lot of stories, and similarly, like with the coaches moving into the ISL as assistant coach, like, are we losing opportunity? Like, you and I had this discussion in the first episode of our little show about the Indian coaches choosing to go to the second division could be better for him in terms of learning and growing and developing, but a lot of them do tend to prefer an ISL job. Is that right, or am I getting it wrong?
Yeah, I think, look, people want eyeballs, people want glory, and I think maybe, again, that's where our coach education system is wrong. We're not encouraging people to do certain things the right way. I'll give an example. I mean, there's a coach who came to India to work with youth, right? He was working with youth in Bangalore, soccer schools, effectively. Went to go on holiday, I think. Met people at Sporting Club de Goa, ended up coaching them, did a very good job. I think he won the Goa Pro League with them. Got the full-time job with them, did well, ended up at Mumbai as an assistant coach in the ISL. Then, was willing to travel, went to Maldives, I think he won the league there, went to Bangladesh, did well. And how many coaches, Indian coaches, do you see following that pattern?
Right? This is Oscar Bruzo, right?
Yeah. So you look at some of the other coaches, you compare them. You look at Elipo's story of countries where he's been to Ghana and coached. He's been to the Middle East, I think Egypt, all parts of it. How many coaches, with the exception of probably, I'd say, Jan, Richard, Francisco, maybe I could probably have missing one or two others, have gone out and said, all right, I'm going to test myself against foreign coaches, or I'm going to test myself in unfamiliar territory, and put themselves in unfamiliar settings, and then come back. I mean, you do that. Look, either it could work. You could go and win the league in Cambodia. Right? The Cambodian league, by the way, doesn't pay as much as some of the second division clubs. But stick your neck out there. Your ACA license is valid. The same in Cambodia as it is in India. It's valid. The same in Mongolia as it is here. Right? Granted, I mean, I'm sure the Ulaanbaatar teams aren't great, but why not put yourself out there? I mean, some coaches did that, then came back. You never know. I mean, even I remember emailing Stephen Constantine way, way back in, I think this was in 99 or something like that, when he had just taken over the Nepal job, and I was coaching some youth in the US, thinking, all right, here's a guy that seems interesting. I read something in the FA Insight magazine and thought, why not reach out to someone? So you look at some of the journeys of coaches who've made it to that level. And Constantine's a perfect example. The Rwandas, the Malawis, the Nepal, where he started off, India back in those days. You've got to sort of, as a coach, take some steps, if you want to say, backwards, sideways, or in strange directions to get you eventually where you want to go. And a lot of coaches, I think, don't want to do that nowadays. They just want that shortcut straight. They think, I've got an A license now, therefore I should be in the top flight. I should be an I-League coach, or I'm an ex-Indian national team player and I've now got my licenses. Therefore, I don't have to go through all the stages a normal coach would have to go through. I should directly get the head coach of an ISL team. And there's that chip on the shoulder or something.
So I think kind of a segue to my next question. It's about players who
Getting good at
Yeah, I always
who
tell
become
Brad,
coaches.
segues really
Again, I'm just going to come straight to the one. Players who become coaches, too easy for them in this country, or you think about deserved? All of them, all of them have something which is why they're there. And what is your personal experience with ex Indian players, internationals who become coaches?
Look, I think it's the same everywhere in the world. There's no difference in India and everywhere. Back in the day in the UK, you'd get it on coaching courses where, the FA were very strict about percentage of people who pass coaching course on their first attempt. Similar to the UK driver's license. It was, almost like they failed a certain percentage. But ex-players seemingly would get fast-tracked, especially the higher level you would play, you get help on your exams and you get fast-tracked on courses. I'm a bigger believer in the way the Dutch do it. I think the way their coach education system is and the way their coaches work through the age groups as they come through is a better system. You don't directly just think, ex-player, therefore you can get there. That said, I think if you've played for your national team, you've represented and you've played a lot of games at a high level as well, I don't think you necessarily need to go through D license, wait a year, C license, wait another year, B license, wait all those years before you can make it. I think you need to have systems where you fast track. And I was speaking to Eric Partler recently because we worked together in the ISF. He went back to Australia to do his C license because looking at it, whether he should do it here or there, they had parallel pathways. One for people who want to do a C license, normal, somebody like you, Orko, who's finished their D and wants to do the C, or ex-players who've represented the country, etc. So they're all in one batch doing it. So I think if you start having systems like that where you have two pathways, like an ex-player pathway and a regular Joe pathway, then those coaching courses can be catered better for ex-players. So, obviously we know they can demo, we know they can do certain things, but there's certain soft skills they may be lacking, there may be sort of tech skills they may be lacking. So you can gear that coaching course better towards what their needs are, and give them a sort of an alternative pathway to get to the A license, and similar to what your pathway might be. So I think that's one way of doing it. The second thing is, look, once you get your license, there's no substitute for hours on the ground. I don't think anybody should get any job in any profession without you actually putting your hours in. Just like I said, you finish your medical degree, you do your master's, you specialize in something, doesn't mean you get a top spot straight away. It's the same with law. You don't make partners straight away, right? You've got to put those hours in. And I think that's invaluable. And coaches who don't realize that you might have got your licenses and you might have played for India, that doesn't mean you're ready to lead a team straight away. Like even look at Pena at FC Goa. He didn't retire at FC Goa, get his licenses in Spain, where it's relatively easier, and just come back and say, all right, I'm now head coach of FC Goa. He's gone through the process of being an assistant somewhere, earning his stripes, and then coming and saying, all right, I'm going to test myself over here. Calderon's another one, ex-Chennai player who's done something similar. So I think you've got to, even for your own development, it's better to go and learn a few years under an experienced head coach and then stick your neck on the chopping block, like what your Lampards and your others are doing at the moment, your Rooney's, etc.
So I mean, when you go, let's say, read some of the journeys of coaches abroad, like René Maric, for example, right, or any of those regular Joes who've played too much Football Manager. I'm not kidding, right? These are actual stories that I was reading the story of an Englishman who ended up in France, right? Because he played too much Football Manager. He started his local English club, then took the jump abroad, and so it's an insane story. So here is the system not enabling the average Joe enough, or do you think there are no good lay people coming through as coaches? Because I mean that seems to be a fairly small category, if I may say so.
It's an interesting one. I kind of knew you were going to ask this question, actually, so I kind of did a little bit of research on it, and I thought, if you look at it, right, we've got players. I mean, I've interacted with quite a few people over here who've not necessarily maybe Football Manager, but whatever, they interested in it. So guys like who work as analysts in clubs, done a lot of stuff on social media, and then they grab your attention because they're posting some interesting analysis stuff on Twitter. And now they've done their D licenses, C licenses, and want to get into the coaching field. And some of them are pretty knowledgeable, and you think if this guy was given the right platform, he could make it. So I think it goes back to, again, the lack of games. If when the ISL finished, let's say, the guys who work as analysts could go and work with an under-13 team, get 20 games under his belt, get 6 months of coaching experience, because they're watching good coaches day-to-day training. They could get that experience. And again, why I thought about it was, you look at the coaches who've had success in India, right? Whether, in the past, it's like, whether it's, somebody like an Elko or Kareem or, I don't know, even if you think about now, Juan Ferrando or some of these coaches around, even Sergio Libera, your mate, Orca, none of them had great playing careers, right? You go find them. It's not like they played or represented at a higher level. They all stopped playing quite early and made it. So I think the proof is there that you can make it, right? Give list of Indian coaches as well. Obviously, there is a flip side to it. The likes of your Derricks and Armands played for had great careers at club level and stuff like that. But there's a lot of other coaches out there who didn't necessarily have great playing careers in India, and very, very good coaches. And again, it comes back to look at where most of our players are coming from. They're being produced by people who, weren't the big names, weren't the ex-national team players.
Right.
So, Brad, we just wanted to shift a little bit. Some questions have come in, so I wanted to look into that. So one of the first ones was update on Indian original football player. I think he's talking about players of Indian origin. There is no update because I think that's a government issue and not really a football issue.
Yeah.
We don't have multiple passports. But what is your take on that? Like, I argued with people saying that I don't want it, but others were quite interested in it.
I have a good creative solution, which keeps everybody happy. Or let's see if it does. You know how we've always had this 3+1 or 4+1 in the ISL or I-League, whatever, about foreign players, right? 3 foreigners plus 1 Asian. My thing was when they were reducing it from 6 down to 5 or whatever, I said, why don't you make it 3+1+1 or 4+1+1? And my logic was, make it 3 foreigners from anywhere in the world, 1 Asian because that keeps him the AFC criteria, and 1 PIO, right? OCI card holder, whichever you want to do it. And the reason for that was I thought, if you've got a spot for that, now every club's going to go out and recruit and try. You're going to try and get the best OCI player out there, obviously, because it's competitive football within your budget. So you might all of a sudden get people looking for, I don't know, maybe like a Nathan Sansaro or the Danny Barts or et cetera, et cetera. Now, if you get the ones at a younger level who, look, let's be honest, they know, like an Aman Sharma, whatever in the UK, like, I'm not going to make it to the Premier League. I'm going to be knocking around in League Two or second tier in France or Spain or whatever those countries, Germany. If I go and play in the ISL and I'm earning $200,000 a year, that's a lot better than what I'm going to earn over here. Now, you do it once and you're the best. Just like how, look, the best AFC player over here, all the clubs start chasing after him. You know, it's myopic scouting, as I call it, right? So a good old Aussie player comes in, everyone goes after him. Good Japanese player in the past, it was the same in the I-League. So similarly, if there's a good OCI player playing, a lot of clubs are going to start upping the ante on how much they're paying. So maybe, Bagan will suddenly start paying him more, or Mumbai might start paying him more. And then all of a sudden, this guy's like now thinking, hang on, this is a good gig I'm on here. I'll sign a 4-year contract. So you're here for 5 years or 3 years or whatever. Now you start thinking, 1 more year here and I can get my passport. Because you already tick all the other boxes. Your parents are of Indian origin at some point because that's how you got your OCI card. And you've lived here for that many years. So you don't need to change the law. You change the system that enables it worthwhile for clubs to invest in somebody like that. And it's tried and tested. He's been in India. He's played over years. So he's obviously going to be able to acclimatize playing with Indians, playing with Indian players. So it helps the national team manager in the future as well. So there are, look, I'm not saying it's 100% it's going to work, but it's a better system than sitting here arguing about the law being changed, because let's be honest, that's possibly not going to happen in our lifetime.
Yeah, possibly. And I think fair enough, right?
Yeah.
He can't change the law for a football team. That's just
Right.
So we have question Kumar Reddy has consistently asked about Dempo.
Yeah.
Since you are working with them now, what is the future plans for Dempo? Can they compete at the top tier? But he says Dempo does not have a proper connect with fans like Goa. But I don't think that the last part is true. I think Dempo is a legacy club in my opinion.
Yes, look, to answer the first part of the question is, it's like asking someone, directions to a place that doesn't exist or hasn't been created yet. Like, as you started the show, you said about when the AFL is going to constitute a body. When they do that, then there's going to be an I-League, body appointed, and then they're going to decide when the I-League starts. Then they'll decide when the second division will start, what format it'll be in, etc. So once all that's in, you'll be able to answer questions about all those pathways, and then based on anything else, I mean, even to build fan bases, everything you need, and we all know this, you need long-term planning. If you know that this league is going to exist over the next X number of years and it's going to be this format, home and away, televised, you can start talking about and investing in connecting with fan bases, etc., etc. But at the moment, there's just too much uncertainty. So anything that you say is just pure speculations.
A very very good colleague of mine, and you also know the colleague. He's the ex Dempo, I would say stalwart. If that's the right word to use for him. He told me that when they shut down, right, there wasn't really like a procession on the streets. They weren't like really coming out in droves and really mourning them. Yes, there was some sadness, but it's not as you would expect. It's not as say there was a lot of what do you say, grief floating around, if that's the right word. And he said that's probably because there are a lot of heavyweights in the state, right? It's not just Tempo, right? You have the Salgaonkars, you have the Sporting, so you have a lot of shared loyalty, if that's even the right word for it.
I don't think they ever, as far as I was aware, they shut down. They just pivoted, right? So they were the original stakeholders in FC Goa, and they still had teams competing in the local local league and Goa League, if I'm not mistaken, and they won the second division and opted not to go into the I League. So it's a conscious decision based on lack of a roadmap at the time. And if you ask me, I can ask you that question: do we have a roadmap at the moment?
No, not as long as one team
in
doesn't
the last
actually physically
live,
get promoted. I can't really say that, right?
in the
As
last
long
live, we learned that the roadmap itself was a lie, apparently.
yeah, the roadmap was a lie.
So,
I found
so,
yeah.
And so here's the other thing: if you compete in the second division now, and let's say you miss out on goal difference, or you miss out on a point, or you miss out, right, and you don't qualify for the I League this season, are you allowed to take part in the second division next year, or do you have to then fill some other criteria? So it's not really a league, is it? It's a tournament.
Yeah, teams are nominated.
it's tournament,
every
yeah.
year. Yeah.
It's a tournament. You're nominated. So how do you ensure you get nominated? So how do you plan for something where you have to be nominated each year?
But I think the new rule is that only state champions can qualify. I think that's a new rule.
Right. That's my point. That goes back to my point. So if you're state champions this year and you play, and then next year, so
you can't ensure that.
you finish second
Yeah,
in the second division, and you're, let's say, 12 points ahead of the nearest team, right? And a team that finished dead last and didn't get a single point, but it's from a state where they're going to win their state league, which runs for 11 days, right? So they come back in the next year in the second division because they've won 11-day state league, which is held just before the next year's second division. But you finished second in an 18 league, very, very competitive state league where you've got, strong teams who are all contenders for the I League, who could all themselves easily compete in the second division where they beat this team from a state where, they have their league in 11 days or whatever, or there's only 4 teams in that state. So your second division isn't taking the best teams in India and putting it in the second division, saying, let you guys try and compete in the I League. You're just nominating some of the best teams and some teams who are just there to make up the numbers. So the whole system at the moment is seriously flawed.
Yeah. So there was another question by Rajishar, and he said you took the driving example of driving in the UK.
Yeah.
And he was asking if it is difficult for Indian football coaches to take the coaching lessons and tests in UK.
Yeah, it's not easy because the formats change from, I remember the days when I did it, it was the old-fashioned way where you go 28 days or whatever number of days it was, and you do your coaching badges, and your course, you finish, come back in 6 months, show your logbooks, do your exam, and that's it. Now when everyone's shifted to a modules-based way of learning, if you were to fly from the UK, do 7 days, come back, go back again 3 months later, 7 days, modules, COVID, flights, visas, etc. It's pretty difficult now and very expensive. But I don't see any reason why you'd need to do your coaching badges in the UK. Your coach education is pretty good over here. The coach education is obviously good. UEFA license is good and has quality, but there's no. That's not to say that our coach education system isn't on par. The difference maker is what the coaches get over there. So, look, you can learn how to drive in India, and you can drive in the US and drive in the UK and wherever, or in Germany, even on the autobahn, right? It doesn't mean we're all going to go over there and crash because we did an Indian driver's license, a driving test. But it's similarly, guys who've got their license over there doesn't mean they'll come over here. And if it was such the case, then why wouldn't we just import a load of UEFA licensed coaches, put them all in our academies, and in 5 years' time, we'd all be, we'd be winning next gen cup games. It's not going to happen, right? Hamilton's not going to be able to drive on the potholed roads over here at the speed he drives over there. Simple as that. You have to fix the road. It's not the license. It's not the car. It's not the driver or the car. It's the roads. So I think that's the best way to sort of answer that question.
So, but I have a question for you. Obviously, regarding Indian coaches, right? It's a very personal, opinion-based question. Any 3 or 5 good Indian coaches below the age of 40? And because listen, we hear about players all the time, right? But we don't really hear about who are the upcoming good Indian coaches, right?
Real age or paper age photo?
Yeah. I mean, you take a swing.
Yeah, take the real age. Yeah,
TW test. So 38 to 42. Yeah.
yeah,
Okay,
okay.
we can go and put the hand
Yeah.
in straight in just a
Yeah,
second.
yeah, go for it.
Oh, so what? You want me to name my top coaches under the age of 40?
Yeah. No, don't worry. They won't know. You're coming to them.
No, I
You all.
don't.
Yeah.
No, I
I mean,
don't know.
first has to be Orko, obviously.
No, no, no.
Sitting here.
No,
I'm talking about,
I don't know the exact ages of coaches because I actually honestly haven't kept track of the ages.
let's say youngish looking coaches. That's very wide. Yeah.
Um, Look, obviously, I think one of the first few names that comes to mind, I think Richard Hood's highly qualified. I mean,
Yeah.
to go and do your coaching badges abroad, it's not easy. And you've done the hard yards, and personally seen his work, worked with him, and seen the players he's developed. I think he's one of the top brains. I still pick his brain on matters on certain stuff. I worked with one at Pune and at Odisha, Anshul.
Anshul.
Anshul's done a similar thing where he's gone to Germany and he's done courses in Portugal. And he's gone. So I think young coaches are looking to expand, and as I said about earlier, go abroad, test yourselves, go and pick up knowledge from other ways, think of different ways of doing it. I think that always interests me because for me, you can also learn from them then, as opposed to it just being just for the sake of hiring a young coach. There's a young coach who's just joined BFC. I've heard good things about him from Delhi, and so there's a lot of good young coaches coming up from different parts. And to be fair, I think some of the ex-players as well. I've heard some good things about some of them in terms of the way they're not necessarily stuck in the way of coaching the way they were coached by their coaches, and they're actually looking to be quite progressive and look at new modern methodologies. And I think that for me, it's like, I think if you're a modern coach now, you've got to be almost like a 360 coach. You've got to have a little bit of knowledge about the analysis side of the game. You've got to have some other skills that you can bring to the table, as apart from just putting on a good session. So I think in the next few years, we'll start to see a few more ones knocking on the door. But yeah, I agree with you. There's a little bit of a glass ceiling there, so it's difficult for unknown names to sort of break into that at the moment. And this is where I think having a longer second division, having a longer I League and all that gives an opportunity. Like if I think back to how I started, it was just, when I just landed in the country, no one knew of me. I just happened to get the Lajong job because they got relegated. Otherwise, no one's going to employ you. And then to get an opportunity like that, work with a team for a full season and then win promotion, it's tough nowadays. So those kind of opportunities don't come. I think that if young coaches can stick their neck out and say, I'll take a punt and take a team where the money may not be as good, the opportunities might not be there, the facilities might not be there, I think then you can carve out a little name for yourself. But like I said, it's not easy. There's a lot more coaches out there now and a lot less jobs.
So I want to one question was Akash Mishra to J League. That was not in the plans at all. It was in someone started a rumor. In fact, I spoke to somebody in Hyderabad and they were also quite surprised.
But that's the season for it. So what happens if you want to, there's clubs trying to get players from one another, and there's agencies also trying to poach from one another. So if you're saying, listen, if you should have signed with my agency, I'd have got you more money. Because look, we got X, Y, and Z to this club and we got him more money. Now, the current agent wants to hold on to that player. You can't offer him more money because he's already done the deal. He's already signed at Hyderabad. So what's the next best thing you can do apart from going and buying him some expensive boots or something is say, oh, look, I've got interest for you from a foreign club. So, find a club where one of your clients is the coach and ask them to drum up some interest. So it's a good little way of getting traction in the media, bumping up the price for next season. So it's the usual. I mean, if that's part of the season where all of a sudden you hear rumors about X, Y, and Z going, I'm going to Sweden or Denmark on trial and this, that, and the other, and then come back and play in India.
So what do you think of this? Like for a long time, as long as you've been in the in Indian football, right? We didn't really have this transfer rumors and this whole other thing. It was something that started by and large during the first COVID lockdown.
Yeah.
And it's a great thing because of the fact that we have such a long off season. It's nice that Marcus got this and people were interested in it for so long. So now the level that we have reached here, we have so many people, so much rumors, so many things going on at the same time. How do you look at this whole circus? Because as a journalist, right, I'm far removed from it. We've had this conversation. I have no interest in this, but it seems to be an amazing opportunity.
No, you hit the nail on the head. You called it. That's what it is. It's a circus, and it's look. There's what 6 foreign players in each club, so 66 players that can possibly be moved, joining every season. Not all of them are looking to replace. So when you run out of that, then it's obviously Indian players are higher ticket prices now when they're moving, especially the marquee ones. Then when that runs out and there's no interest, you've got to keep your likes on websites and this and that and followers. So yeah, start rumors. Rumors is the next best. I mean, look, and it's not just an Indian phenomenon. It's global. I think the BBC Sport gossip column, transfers and it's called Transfers and Gossips, is the site, the page that gets the most hits for them. So it's good. Look, it keeps people talking about the game. It's great, but I think you've got to have a good filter there. You got to have a good bullshit radar. So like that Mishra one is like the first thing you just think, that seems a bit fishy. And you dig a little bit deeper, you realize, okay, this is the game that's going on, and there'll be plenty of those. But some of it's quite amusing, actually. I think it's quite. Otherwise, we'd only get on April Fools. You get some, he's going to this club transfer. Now you get some April Fools every week. So.
Yeah, that's great. So there's another question from Roshan. What's your stand on the level of Indian referees?
On par with the level of football.
The best answer.
But like when you're on commentary, right? I love the fact that you call out when the player is obviously just wasting time or something like that. Because the referee has to obviously take a role.
Look, we've had plenty of calls both on coaching courses, as candidates, as instructors, even as media, where we speak with the referees before the start of the season. So, look, even they're aware of certain players' play antics and all that, and certain things that happen. But there's players out there trying to con the referee, and the referees just almost always are trying to err on the side of caution. They'd rather be wrong and let the time wasting happen than be seriously wrong where a player is genuinely injured and they've said play on. So I think they always are on that side, which is a shame. But yeah, look, it's a global thing. It's not, again, it's the same thing. Yeah. You look at ball in play time statistics in the UK. It's something why they're concerned about, and they're putting multiple ball now. They bring a multi-ball system into the Premier League, whereas it used to just be one football, right? So they're changing that because they're concerned about the lack of actual game time in the game. I think the MLS were trying to trial something where if a player goes down and it's time wasting, they keep him off for a certain amount of minutes or something like that. So people everywhere are looking at it. I think we have to do something about it. I mean, I think there's definitely there's ways that can be used. I think retrospective punishment of players is one way they can do it. That could clamp it down. The other is, if it's a cramp, don't put the ball out. All this, that culture has to change, and that's to an extent, it's got to come from the coaches as well. It's not just the referees; it's got to come from the coaches. Look, certain things are taught by coaches. Players don't just start going down, cramping, and holding their leg to kill the clock, or changing their date of birth. It's stuff that comes from coaches. So there is a responsibility there as well.
Absolutely.
And, but the coaches never get the ban. Neither does the.
Yeah. Absolutely. So exactly. Maybe if you punish that side of it, it'll stop.
But
they have to do it world over then.
No,
at least
here's my question, right? So a 16-year-old gets caught because he's probably, he's not his right age, right? And the coach can easily say, this wasn't done by me, this was done by whoever used to coach him before, right? And I am not the enabler. I've also heard people.
You are the enabler because it's done.
Yeah.
And you're letting it pass, but you're just saying it wasn't done by me. So you are actually enabling.
But do coaches always know this?
Of course. I just went to a recent game where a national team under whatever, some 16, age group it was. Yeah.
18?
16. Well, yeah, 16. They looked 18 at very least. So everybody on the sideline, every single person, every neutral I'm talking about, and people from, I'm just saying there's not a single player there who's under 16. I'll give you a perfect example. So there was a kid playing for that team, and this is the India under 16 team, who we had seen at on our coaching course, Chandigarh, when he was there with Chandigarh Football Academy. Kid's a decent player. I was like, oh, I quite like this player. So I thought, let me, for future, I don't know which club I'm going to go to or end up. So speaking to the player, I used him in some of my sessions. Kid decides to follow me on Instagram. So like, who's this kid? Go through his 10, 15 photographs. I was like, oh yeah, that's centre mid that was playing, the one that I quite liked. Add him on Instagram. And then now 3-4 months go by. Saw him playing the other day. I was like, I recognize that kid. He's that one from Chandigarh. He looks pretty good. Still playing in that same position. Couldn't remember his name, I think. That age I'm getting to, names don't stick. So I went back on Instagram to see who was that kid. I don't have so many followers. And couldn't go through all the photographs because they're all deleted. There's only just one picture of him. So now tell me, would a 15-year-old, because if he's under 16, he's obviously 15, would a 15-year-old, having just 3 months earlier had all these pictures, now signed for a national team federation, why would he delete all of those pictures? I wonder. So, just food for thought.
No, even clubs get away with a slap on the wrist. Even clubs just get away with a slap on the wrist. It's like a 1-year ban in that age group. That's it. That's the maximum that happens.
So you start banning a coach for 1 year because he's had a player on his team that was an age fraud, it'll stop.
Yeah. And if you want to know more about age fraud, I've written the article. It's on my Twitter feed. I'm going to.
We need an entire episode for this.
We need an entire episode. Yes.
I'm telling you.
So,
and we have to get Richard. Richard
we
used to run a page. Richard used to run a page on Facebook, and it's actually a brilliant page.
He has written a blog.
Yeah. The LinkedIn blog I've seen, but there is also
another blog. He's written somewhere. He found it for me and sent it to me one day. Look at this, what I've written. But Brad, some other questions have come. Akash is asking about SAF Cup, SAF Under 20, and the Nexten Cup. Okay. So I'll let you handle that.
You had to mention under and 20. So
yeah.
What's the question about it?
He wants to know about your opinion about the SAF Under 20 and the Nexten Cup. I guess it's our performance.
But they're in the finals. Probably go on to beat Bangladesh and win it. So then everyone thinks everything's rosy, right? And that's the best part. It's like victories cover up all the other failings. I said it on your show, Sandeep, the other day. Can't have a national team sequestered for an entire year training with 25, 30 boys and think these are the best players and they'll always be the best players for the next couple of years, right? The old cliche, about form, etc. You have to pick. You have to have a competitive environment. You have to be picking in a country, any country, doesn't matter. The whole population thing is rubbish. There's no point saying 1.3 billion because even in Uruguay, population that's probably the size of Mizoram. You don't.
Most of the players, yeah.
So look at Mizoram. Does Mizoram State FA take their best players and just keep them in one academy in Rajiv Gandhi Stadium and say, all right, we're going to train with these Mizo boys, okay, for the next 4 years and play them in our Santosh Trophy, play them in our Mir Iqbal and all the other tournaments. Say, these are the boys of the future of Mizoram. Or do they have a huge, like FA Cup style league system now where teams from all over the state, villages, districts can come in and play, and then the finalists will play in Aizawl?
Yeah.
Which one do you think produces more players? And is there a surprise that they're producing players? Manipur is producing players. They're not doing that. So why, when we're not doing it at a micro level, do we suddenly decide that at the national team level we should do this? We don't do it. Well, by the way, we're very good at cricket compared to global standards. We don't do it in cricket. We don't take 18, 19-year-olds and stick them in NCA in Bangalore and say, right, you will not play for anybody else, just for our team. And we will produce the best bowlers and batsmen and fielders in the world. No. We have a competitive environment in that. And you can be the best player. You're still not guaranteed your place in the national team. Super competitive. Why don't we do that in football? So it just doesn't make sense that the system that we have for that. Next Gen Cup, you could do a whole episode on that. So the less said, the better.
I
Pass.
mean, I
It's
saw.
two different generations, by the way, competing there. So.
Yeah. Uh,
I mean, I saw them taking the Mickey out of the team, and I was like, I'm done.
yeah.
That one was
These
really
are
bad.
16 and 17-year-olds against proper,
National team players.
Yeah, but see,
yes.
the only thing, I mean, I said this to some of the coaches who work with those younger boys. I said it's not a fair comparison because
Yeah.
your boys have played probably 40,
400 games
yeah,
by
40
that
to
age.
400. Those
Yeah.
kids have played 400 competitive games. These kids have played 40. So, well,
100,
yeah, from a
150.
player's perspective, you can't blame them. They are just it's
Yeah.
worlds apart in terms of exposure. My thing is like the reason you get knocked by people like us is because when you hype it so much and you try and polish something to that level, look, just face it what it is. It is what it is. It's a tournament that doesn't require even CRS and stuff like that. It's a friendly tournament, and for me, just certain things just crop up. If a team like BFC is going all the way there to play friendly matches against certain people, why wouldn't you go all the way up to just a little short journey up the road to your parent, your sister club, Glasgow Rangers, and play them instead of taking selfies in front of Emirates Stadium or wherever it was. So that, in a way, sums up the end of the tour. Sums up what it was. It's no different than if anybody in Delhi decides to say, "All right, we're taking a team to the Gothia Cup or to Barcelona." Everybody pays, and then we go and play some teams from Sweden and come back and say, "Yes, we beat a team in Barcelona," as opposed to beat Barcelona, you beat a team in Barcelona. So it's
I mean,
I'm
since
I'm working with the setup in Delhi, right, where the I'd say the guy in charge very smart, right, very good coach, somebody who believes in getting game time any way they can get it. It could be like a 7v7 tournament, could be a 9v9, as long as it's competitive, as long as people are fighting it out, as long as people are duking it out. And these is for, let's say, 15-year-old girls, 14-year-old, 16-year-old girls. So he's like, I'll just take it whichever way I get it, right? Any game time is good game time. So I was just wondering about the efficacy. Is it just 11v11 just for our viewers, right? What is your take? Should we take it any way we get it game time?
look. I think again, if you look at age-old argument, best players in the world, they just played any game, right? You look at your players coming, your Sadio Mane's just played growing up. It wasn't just organized 11v11, was it? They just played any game they could get. Suarez in Uruguay, they played small-sided from baby leagues, etc. So, and again, you want to use a closer to home comparison. You look at our cricket players. What are they doing? Your gully cricket, your this and that still produces players. You can't. There's no substitute, and that goes for any sport. You look at basketball players that come through, any of the top players that come through. They play a lot of it. Each game that you play gives you a different problem solving, different conundrum. Whether you're playing the organized 11v11, that's a different thing. You're playing the 7v7, you're playing five-a-side, you're playing futsal. All of those will give you different tools and different skill sets. Not just technical skill sets, but even physically, mentally, all the psychology of it. Playing with older kids, younger kids. So sometimes we can just get too structured in saying, like, we're 14, we're only going to play 14-year-olds. Why not? Play an under 16s. Let some boys play against girls at a younger age group. Why not? So a lot of good female players. You're reading now about these girls who, the women who won the Euros for England. You look at
All
the
started
story,
playing with boys.
you look
Yeah.
at the stories of all of them and how there was no organized football for them growing up. So sometimes those are the best examples to give people.
Bala Bem Bem. We don't even go that far. Bala and Bem Bem both
I mean,
started playing with
most of
boys.
these girls, Dalme, all of these, yeah.
Dangme, yeah.
Yeah, you have to. I mean, in India, there's only to a certain level, maybe in the urban areas, but apart from that, there is no organized football for girls.
Yeah.
So you have to be creative, and especially with women's football in India, you have to take whatever game you can. If you're an under 14 girls team, obviously you can't necessarily play under 14 boys. Maybe play some under 12 boys, right? You may not have field sizes to play 11v11, so you have to be creative.
Yeah, Steve Darby was saying that he used to get the girls to play against the men, but men can only play one touch or two touch.
Yeah, exactly.
So they get used to the pace and some physicality in that. So fair enough. I think that's a good opportunity there also. Brad, a couple of questions only left, and
Yep.
one of them is more something. So because you mentioned Uruguay, they obviously produce the most number of players, at least in one of the statistics, who go out and play, like lots of football professionals.
Mm-hmm.
Most of them come from Montevideo because they keep playing against each other, and absolute the cream rises to the top and they move on, and that
Yeah.
competitive sort of things is what pushes that country out. Obviously, it's a small country. Now in India, when you're looking at it, like you said, Mizoram is doing fantastic because of the local league structure, and there are a few other places who are trying to not replicate it, but trying to increase the games and things like that. So why it seems logical to have a micro approach rather than a macro approach, right?
Yes, but we don't do logic over here in Indian football.
I mean, what do I reply to that question?
That's the truth. I mean, it's if we did things logically, we probably wouldn't be having all these discussions. It's
Yeah.
we just look, and just because now it's working over there in Mizoram, you can't copy paste that idea and say, all right, we're going to do that in I don't know, Himachal Pradesh, and it's going to work, right? You have to tailor situations for what you have at the moment, what your culture is, what your settings are, what you can do. There's this whole host of other factors. So I think, but getting back to that point, yeah, you have to think micro and think, look, if each person, if each state or each district, they work on their little areas and start just having more games, that itself will just create better players. And bringing back to how the conversation started about coaching licenses, we can stop doing coaching courses for the next 5 years, but we increase the number of games that kids are playing from the age of 8 up to 18, and we increase it significantly, but have zero coach education. We'll produce more players than if we create 10,000 D license, 20,000 B license, and 100,000 A license coaches. That I'll put, I'll give it, there's no obviously way we can prove that, but that's my opinion.
And there are some states who just give it out like laddu. I'm serious. There's some people.
Spain.
No, there's some states. There's some states here, who hold, let's say, 4D licenses in a month, up to 4 sometimes.
Look, I think a few years ago, Spain was like that. I think they had rival federation, or there were the two federations giving out coaching licenses as well. You had this.
Oh yeah, they didn't get along.
Yeah, you all of a sudden had people with UEFA Pro licenses who've never coached a pro team, which is farcical. I think if you're on a pro license course, you have to at least. You look at the English FA's criteria, even to get on an A license. The wait list was so long that you'd have to be affiliated with a club that had direct entry into the FA Cup. And to get on the pro license, you had to have been with a team that's in the professional league. Otherwise, why should you get on the pro license as opposed to somebody else? So I think we need to keep certain standards up like that as well, whereby if you're on a pro license course, you should have at least worked with a professional team, not just be there for other reasons. So
yeah. So this is the last question because I know I've kept you because you are a early riser, so you need to
and
get
I
back.
feel up at 5 for training tomorrow.
Yeah. So so this is the last question, and I put a link on the thing because I had written an article about this, and it was about what style of football people should follow because we want to do this Spanish tiki taka or whatever. India being what it is, the players being what they are. My opinion may be different from what yours is. Is there a single style of football that we can implement here, other than in terms of say attitude of fight hard and work hard or battle for everything kind of an attitude? Because mostly we are punching up rather than punching straight or down. Especially when you're trying to move up the ranks. So, is there, in your opinion, a style of football that we can follow?
It's a good question. I think simple answer for me is no, because I think we're too diverse a country, and I think whenever we've tried it, it's failed because people won't stick with something for long enough. So there's arguments both ways. Look, we get a Dutch coach coming in and saying this is how everyone should play in the country. This is how our coach education should be. This is how our youth development should be. Doesn't work. We ditch it after 5 years, and then let's say a German technical director comes in, we go with that, or a Romanian, and then we go with that. So I think we've got to start adapting our own. styles of play, and what, again, going back to the same thing, micro. If coaches in Goa are working with players and doing certain things very well, and they're producing good players. If we have a competitive youth, like I said, okay, connected back to the arrows thing, if we have regional under 20 teams, so we have a West Zone team, North, South, East, West, and a Northeast, like the usual 5 zones in the air, and you put together your best under 20 teams, and you play every certain number of months, like every quarter. If the teams from, let's say, the South are dominating, and they have a certain style of play, the coach who picks the under 20 team and then goes to work with him, possibly you pick the style that suits the players that you have. Right? If the teams from the North are winning and they're a lot more direct, let's say, just to use the old cliche, they're from Punjab and they're quite direct and they're winning, but those players are effective, why not go with that? Look, Sukhwinder's done well with teams like that in the past with Indian teams, and it's courses for courses. With what players you have to based on the players you have. From the youngest age, players be comfortable on the ball, mentally good, all that. So, yes, under eights. Of course, you're not going to start teaching under eights, start launching and win your first ball, win second ball, etc. You're going to try and teach them to build up, etc. But that's a long-term project. I mean, we're talking about style of play over, it's like asking somebody who's just had a newborn kid, and which college do you want to go to, which medical school, and like that. So it's a long way off. There has to be steps in place for that. So
this is why
kindergarten school is the best place to ask them where you put her in, rather than which college you're admitting.
This is what I was thinking, because I thought attitude was the only thing that we can actually try and regulate. You have to be like work hard and show your fight and all those kind of things, which we as normal people will think that I can see.
Every team will do that. It's not like a Vietnamese team.
But don't you feel like when we actually,
yeah.
But don't you? Sometimes I've seen teams who do not work hard at all. That's a whole other story. But don't you feel like whenever we felt, oh, India is doing well, it's one of those games where India had a little bit of a problem and then they had to sort of overcome it, and then we look at it in the next day, one full page is there about the performance and all those kind of stuff.
But that's a funny thing, right? If an Indian team fought hard against a team that had 10 men behind the ball like Maldives did, and then you only managed to score in the 80-plus minute, it's like, oh, not good enough, only beating Maldives 1-0. Because previous to that, the matches were, tennis score lines, right? So you get criticism for that. Whereas you lose 1-0 to Japan or to China or somebody at the moment, you'd be like, that's brilliant performance by the coach, right? So there's a certain amount of perspective has to go into it, but it's our expectation. People just expect us, all right, you should be winning every SAF Cup game 6-0. Why? Right? And then you've got teams who just think, fans or whoever, people in the game just think, well, we used to beat Vietnam comfortably back in the 60s and 70s, and now we've lost, and the coach is terrible, without any knowledge of how much Vietnamese football has improved over the years. So I think there's a little bit of perspective gets lost in national team games, and because there's just possibly not enough knowledge about how good opposition teams are, or where we really rank in the whole scheme of things. And and some things like the AFC Cup and Champions League nowadays can be misrepresenting, because you think, all right, we've really improved because we're now in this tier and we're doing this, but it's not necessarily, especially in the last couple of years, an accurate description of the level where we are.
And I'm reminded of a certain match that we played against a certain Italy side a few years ago. Yeah. So, but because
Certainly.
so, yeah, no, I'm not certain that was Italy. Yeah. So because this is episode on coaching, I just want to end by saying I'm very happy that Lord Voldemort is back to India, and we're hoping for a mid-season review with Prad. Right? No, you can screen share and I can show you the similarities, but no, we won't get into that. But yes, I'm very happy that our man is back, and we'll get Prad back for a mid-season review for sure.
Yeah, you do. We still have a preseason review to do.
Yeah,
So
preseason review. Yeah, and we already spoke about this. We had a differences opinion there also, but fair enough.
No, I'm just
You
excited.
you should really tune in and watch some of those.
I did, but I'm just really excited to watch him again. On the touchline. I'm just sad he didn't sign Rafiq because they had some very good matches together. More Rafiq, his trusted lieutenant, and a lot of them. Maybe Sumit Pasi comes back. We don't know, but
Hali is pretty stuck in Hyderabad. They really like him there, so he's going to be
yeah,
staying. That's
yeah.
for sure. Yeah, but
Robinson, a favorite that both Coach Prad and the Lord share in common.
Robinson, yeah.
Robinson.
He's also a lord, isn't he?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm done.
But
I know he's not watching. It's okay.
I mean, it's going to be very interesting. I want to see. Let's see if you have great history with East Bengal coaches, especially recent English East Bengal coaches. Good ding dong battle. So, but I think this will be a lot more. What do
Hey,
you?
I'm not blocked by him. A lot of people who I work with are. So
Yeah.
I'm not really allowed to speak. So, it's,
So fair enough. So Fad, thanks so much for your time. I think 10 o'clock we are pushing it now.
yes.
So yeah, I mean, thanks again. Last minute you were there to take over this conversation and have some direction into this and some expertise as well. Otherwise, it would just be me and Orko just shouting at each other. So
That's more fun to watch sometimes, I think.
saying this, the number of people who loved the fact that Naveen and I were shouting at each other because he kept talking about Istiklal and I kept saying Istiklal. Number of people who messaged me saying that was the best fight. That's the way to go. Yes. So
All
on that note, I'm just going to end this now. Fred, thank you so much.
Thanks, guys.
Arto,
Really
again,
nice
Fred.
thank you so much.
See ya.
Everybody who tuned in, thank you so much. Please subscribe and do all the good things, because
Okay.
that would be nice.